welcome to another episode of Tori Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
There's no Larry. Hi, I'm Jesi. I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. I think what happened was during this session, Tori suggested that we get Chipotle for everybody. And I decided I was not going to have anything because I wasn't hungry and I'm not into flaming jalapeno bean burritos.
And I'm just not into Chipotle.
That's a smart decision because
Clearly.
Larry and Tori decided they were going to have not one burrito, but two burritos. And
Fools.
so both of them are in the bathroom, and I don't know when they're coming out.
It's okay, we'll pretend they're here.
So we waited long enough, and we're going to be going over a work called Junkie by William S. Burroughs. William S. Burroughs is part of the Beats movement, and he was known most for Naked Lunch. But Junkie was his first piece, and it has to do with him talking about his heroin addiction. He also talks about his experiences with other substances and drugs, such as marijuana, alcohol. He also talks about a native drug at the very end.
Yahweh, something.
Yeah, it was, it's
with a Y, I think.
yeah, it does start with a Y. Oh, Yaj, or Yage.
I was way off.
Yeah, something along those lines. But the discussion starter for Junkie is, how effective do you feel Burroughs' voice was as a junkie or heroin addict? Do you feel his perspective jumped off the page?
I wouldn't say it necessarily jumped off the page, but I feel like his perspective was relatively easy to understand just because there was no real reasoning behind anything. And that's really the only way I can think of saying it. It's just, I went into this book, with, I at first didn't really want to read it. I'm not going to lie, when I saw my name down for Junkie, I was like, I don't know if I really want to read this. But then, I looked it up and I realized that, it was coming from the perspective of a drug addict. And unfortunately, in my family, there have been drug addicts. So, I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to kind of see how the other side thinks and how they feel about things and what they go through. And walking away from this book, I feel more informed, and I feel like I can see the other side of things better than I would have if I didn't.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I think that it gave me, I have no interest in becoming a drug user, and but at the same time, I don't want to close the book and say, drugs are wrong, drugs are evil, if you do drugs, you're evil, and that's not true, and I feel like he covers that too,
with the very first part when he talks about like how doctors are always looking for, a reason, like, why are you a drug addict? Why do you have to do drugs? And his first thought is, I can't tell you. Like, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear because you're a doctor and I'm just trying to get some junk, like, whatever. But, he doesn't really have a reason. He just woke up one day, he did it, and, now he does it, and that's that.
It was interesting, the story that he gave about he had a dream and that some fairy told him that he was going to become, that he's bound to become a drug addict.
Yeah, that was a little.
Or that heroin was the answer to his issues.
Yeah.
The issue to his nightmares.
Because that's what he told the doctor, right? The doctor's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was something along the line. It was because he used to have sleeping problems. But the answer, it was, here's the paragraph. Actually, my earliest memories are colored by a fear of nightmares. I was afraid to be alone and afraid of the dark and afraid to go to sleep because of dreams where a supernatural horror seemed always on the point of taking shape. I was afraid someday the dream would still be there when I woke up. I recall hearing a maid talk about opium and how smoking opium brings sweet dreams. And I said, I will smoke opium when I grow up.
Because I did this actually, I listened to the 50th anniversary of Junkie via Audible to and from work over the last couple days.
That's the audio adaptation?
Oh, yes.
That?
Okay, so then you probably have it here too. It wasn't, not the author's note, but like it had a lot, I want to say like a good chunk in the beginning of just like the publisher's note, I think it was, or the editor's note.
Yeah, there's an introduction.
And
I don't read introductions though.
Oh, okay. I ended up listening to the introduction. Introduction. Whew, wow. And it was actually kind of interesting because what he said actually about that paragraph was the more you read it, the more you can't tell if he's joking or not. Like, I mean, as a kid, you would think that as a kid, you know, yeah, you hear somebody talk about, oh, this, you know, great drug that makes me sleep better. Like a kid would really think that, but then you think about it some more and you go, wait a minute, nobody's saying that. Nobody's doing that. So it's more of just like a comical kind of thing. And then the third time you read it, it's like, nope, this is just an excuse to do drugs. And it's just interesting how he had said, you know, every time you read this, you gain a different perspective. And so I actually might end up reading it again just to kind of see if my thoughts change on it a little bit, or how I understand it changes a little bit. I mean, I know you said there's really not much of an actual story. It's really just him going around scoring, getting clean, scoring, getting clean, scoring, and that's really it. Yeah,
it's pretty much, it's more so an account from a heroin addict. It's nothing more than that. He incorporates people and talking about the pharmacists that used to write them the prescriptions and how one of them eventually figured out and he wouldn't be able to do it anymore for them. But it was interesting to answer your question about why he does it. He does answer the question in the prologue along the lines of the question is frequently asked, why does a man become a drug addict? And he says that while he does not intend to do so, he says that it does take 3 months' time to actually develop an addiction.
Yeah.
But there's the whole idea that you become this is me quoting now, you become a narcotics addict because you do not have strong motivations in any other direction. Junk wins by default. I tried it as a matter of curiosity. I drifted along taking shots when I could score. I ended up hooked. Most addicts I have talked to report a similar experience. They don't talk about starting. They drift and then they become hooked. So it's pretty much,
that's what I'm saying.
as you said,
there's really no
just
reason.
Because.
It's just.
But it's interesting how he also goes on to the point that they make him look young and that it gives them.
Well, what is it? He said he
purpose
lost
to live.
15 pounds in 3 days or something like that.
Yeah, those kind of drugs really make you as skinny as a rail.
Yeah.
Heroin, I think methamphetamine, cocaine.
Yeah, I was gonna say he was just using also like morphine pills and codeine too. Like it was literally everything.
Yeah, well, he has a glossary for all of them too.
He was calling some M and some H and some C and
like,
C
cocaine. There's.
I thought the M was the morphine. I thought, and H
morphine,
was heroin.
H was heroin. He also calls heroin Horse and Henry.
Yes.
And morphine M and MS.
I thought it was interesting too how he covered the stages of withdrawal, which is not something I can say that I ever really understood before. And I mean how he called it sickness, and you know he also covered how the cure was 30 days. And it just, I mean, it made me think of, you know, some of the people that I know, because, you know, I grew up, a lot of people that I, you know, was close with growing up are unfortunately now, you know, struggling with drug addiction. And I feel for them, because, and especially now after reading this book, you know, as they're talking about getting clean. And I mean, it seems like it's just really exhausting on the body, just between taking the drugs and fighting to stay off the drugs, and then taking them again, and then fighting to get off them again. And it just, I mean, it just seems so tiring. And like I said, I mean, this gave me a whole new viewpoint on, you know, how to see those struggles.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Not just in the emotional sense, but also the physical sense too. He was telling, it was an interesting tidbit when he said that for some reason people who become junkies don't like hot water. They don't want to. They don't like to shower or bathe in hot water.
Yeah, he said something like how it makes their skin feel like weird, which something I never knew.
Yeah.
Like,
and most of us don't. It's cold water that makes most of us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I mean, all of his travels and all the different people he met, and it just, again, also kind of gives you an idea of, like, I mean, he even describes some of the people as just like normal Johns, that you would have never expected them to be, you know, drug addicts or anything. And then you had the ones that looked like drug addicts that were like, no, pass. And then I think even at the end of the book, he talks about how the police wised up and started having agents like get addicted to junk so that they could catch dealers. Like, it's because they were like, oh, you know, he's a cop if he won't shoot up with you. So then you find this new guy, he shoots up with you for a week, and the next thing you know, he's getting pinched. And I thought that was interesting too, because that's
a very interesting approach.
Yeah, and I'm like,
that somebody would put themselves on the line in
Yeah.
order to fulfill their job and catch people.
and I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I would imagine he wouldn't have wrote it if it didn't happen to some degree. But I mean, that's definitely something I kind of want to look into. Did they actually have cops that, you know, were addicted and they let them be addicted to catch the dealers? Like,
I'd have to do more research on that, but you have I think one of the major things about a piece like this is the time in which it was written, because there were drug laws that took effect in the 1930s.
Yeah, where it was like against the law to be a drug addict. So if they saw like the needle or the needle marks on your arm or something, you automatically got arrested or something like that.
Yeah, and this was 1953 that it was written and released, and takes place post-World War. So the whole the fact that this a work like this is taking place 65 to 75 years ago is quite a pioneering perspective when it comes to heroin addiction, because who would even think about releasing something of this nature, let alone engaging in these acts?
Yeah, I think the editor even kind of covers that a little bit in his note about how it was very not controversial. It was almost groundbreaking for the time that it was released, because it wasn't something anybody expected to see available to read, let alone an account of it, like as in semi-autobiographical, as opposed to like a full fiction.
That's the way the Beats era is. The Beats era was very much giving everybody, including the drug addict, a voice in not just literature, but in society. And one of the ways to do it is through literature.
And he wrote another book called Queer.
Yes,
too.
Queer was his second book.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but I thought my understanding was that Queer was kind of along the same lines as this one, just covering the different part
it covers
of his life.
his homosexuality. part of his life.
Yeah, as opposed to like I feel like it almost sounds like if you put queer and junkie into one, it would be a complete book because he does, you know, some homosexual kind of acts in this to get the junk.
Yeah.
And that he was introduced to the whole homosexual world, I guess, because of junk. So I mean, I would be interested to read queer just to kind of see if it is almost like basically what we're missing from this. Would it be there?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I would definitely be inclined to check that one out too, especially because I found Junkie at an antique store in Pilesgrove.
Oh yeah?
It's a place called The Find. I went with a coworker of mine. I knew about the Naked Lunch. I really didn't have interest, but I found this and I looked into it and it was intriguing. So
yeah, it's really like he's not a bad writer at all. I feel like he's very almost like the last discussion we had, just very short to the point. Like as Larry said, yeah, straightforward. Like this is who I am. This is what I did. There you go. And
he gives you more information about what it is that he's doing. So you learn more about the drugs themselves and what kind of things they do. And he even concedes to the fact that you don't want to drive under the influence.
Yeah.
Because it does impair your timing. He doesn't try to make an excuse or some kind of a fabrication or lie about it.
And I think what else I kind of like about this book, to go based on what you said too, is that I've read I've read a good number of books, and a good chunk of them too, especially the modern ones, do tend to involve drugs or a drug addict of some point, and in a way it almost seems like it's romanticized, which I find a little concerning in a sort of way, just because drugs like heroin, cocaine, like methamphetamines, like they shouldn't be romanticized. It shouldn't be something that makes you wonder to the point like, oh man, I'm gonna try this. And he gives you just the straight bare facts. Like, he met a stranger in a bar that said, hey, want to go to bed with me? And he said, okay. And he went, and they shot up drugs. And that was that. Like, and that's his life. There's nothing romantic about that. And I don't mean romantic in the, like, flowers and candle kind of way, but you know, like anything that's any sort of alluring to that lifestyle. And I think he did a really good job in kind of portraying it as, like, his life was difficult because of it. Yeah. Like, he did a lot of traveling. There was a lot of problems with his wife. His wife almost got into trouble quite a few times because of him, if I remember correctly. Like, that's not, like, his life was more difficult because of this stuff. And not more glamorous, not more fun, nothing. It was, he needed his next fix, and he needed to get it. And he was living on the streets because of it.
And there is no mention in this piece about his wife, his second wife, that died because he shot her in the head in a William Tell act, where she put the apple on her head and he was supposed to shoot the apple, but instead shot her head.
I cannot say enough. Don't ever let me do that, okay? That just seems like I don't trust anybody well enough to do that.
I would not. I would make sure that you do not put yourself through it.
I don't care, no.
Alrighty then. Do we have any final thoughts?
I mean, overall, I think it was, you know, a good read. It really gives you a new perspective on something, especially as somebody who's never been a drug addict, who doesn't really know much on the aspects of doing drugs. I've been pretty good. I like my wine, but aside from that, I'm pretty clean. So
yeah, I don't do any.
I don't really do anything. So.
Drugs, alcohol.
Yeah, it just kind of gives you a different kind of look at how the other side is and sees things.
I can see that. How would you rate it on a 0 to 5 scale? Half stars permitted?
I think I would give it 3.5, I think. Maybe a 4. I can't, like, right in between
That's
there.
exactly where I stand.
Yeah,
I
like,
have it at 3.5 because I like I like the perspective that he gives, and I like the details. I like what I learned about drug addiction and from a drug addict, but there's no story.
exactly. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. It's like I don't want to. I feel like it deserves more than a 3.5, but not quite a 4. Like I'm definitely like stuck right in there because, like you said, there's no story at all. You basically, I mean, if you're hoping to open up this book and say, "Man, I'm going to read about this drug addict getting clean," no, you're not. You're going to read about a drug addict who goes to, asylum and gets clean for 30 days and then leaves and does more drugs and then cleans himself up and then does more drugs and then goes to Mexico and then cleans himself up and does more drugs and sells drugs and then does more drugs and then sells drugs and then gets clean, gets pinched, does more drugs. Like, it's really, it's just an endless cycle until the end of the book where there's nothing.
Yeah.
Like,
he talks about something new. He talks about age.
He doesn't die. He doesn't go to jail. He doesn't
He actually
get
lived
clean.
a pretty long life.
Yeah, he just he does drugs. He does, and then the book's over. So I was just like,
it's just his experience.
That's just it.
Because then he wrote Queer. He wrote Naked Lunch. He wrote a few other books. He was writing into the 1980s.
Yeah, he's definitely not a bad writer.
He died in 1997. He was 83 years old. So
I like I said, I would be interested in reading Queer just because I feel like it's Queer and Junk are like one in the same, just different points. I guess that's going about.
I'll definitely have to look into Queer, and also I may look into the Naked Lunch. I know Andrew
I'm
said
not quite sure how, like, what that's. I want to figure out what it's about because I mean I was intrigued a little bit from the editor's note that I read. That I'm like, I mean, first off, it's called Naked Lunch. Like, what does that even mean? Like you go to Panera with nothing on but your birthday suit? I don't know. Like, what does that mean? But yeah, no, he's not a bad writer. It was just I left the book wanting more of a story. And I mean, while I gained perspective, information, like you said, I didn't get that enjoyment of finishing a story out of it because there was no story.
No, I get your drift incompletely, or I get your drift completely.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in checking out Junkie, here is the 50th anniversary definitive edition, written by William S. Burroughs. Be sure to join us next time on another episode of Literary Gladiators. I hope Larry and Tori are better at that point, and that they think before they decide to get jalapeno bean burritos from Chipotle.
Maybe their ghosts are here.
Is that a snort that I hear?
The chair's moving.
See you next time. Keep reading.